I knew something was wrong the moment I opened the letter and saw my own name attached to money I had never received. At 68 years old, I thought I had learned every lesson life wanted to teach me. I had survived the loss of my husband, Michael. I had learned how to sleep alone in a house that once echoed with laughter. I had learned how to smile when people told me time would heal everything. But nothing prepared me for the envelope waiting in my mailbox on a quiet Tuesday morning in late October. The return address belonged to a federal tax office. At first, I assumed it was routine. Maybe a correction. Maybe a notice sent by mistake. I carried it into the kitchen, set it beside my coffee mug, and looked out the window while the old maple tree in my backyard dropped another handful of golden leaves onto the grass. It seemed like an ordinary day, the kind of day that passes without leaving a mark. I opened the letter slowly and began reading. By the second paragraph, my stomach tightened. According to the notice, I had received income from an account that did not belong to me. According to their records, I had authorized financial activity over the past several years. According to documents they possessed, everything appeared legitimate. I read the page again, then a third time. My hands felt cold despite the warm coffee sitting inches away. There had to be a mistake. I had spent more than 30 years working as an accountant. I knew how records worked. I knew how paperwork worked. Numbers rarely lied. People did. I carried the letter into my home office and pulled open a filing cabinet. One folder became two. Two became six. Within an hour, papers covered my desk. Tax returns, bank statements, insurance records, every document I could find. Nothing matched what was described in the letter. Nothing explained where the money had gone. Nothing explained why my name appeared on transactions I had never approved. Around noon, I called the phone number listed on the notice. The representative was polite, professional, calm. She confirmed that the records existed. She confirmed that authorization forms had been filed years earlier. She confirmed that the account remained connected to my identity. Then she said something that made my heart skip a beat. "Ma'am, according to the documents we have, another individual was granted authority regarding the account." I asked for the name. There was a brief pause. I heard typing on a keyboard. Then she read it aloud. "Eleanor Bennett, my mother-in-law." I stared at the wall after the call ended. Eleanor was 74 years old. For more than 20 years, she had been part of my life. After Michael passed away, she often called to check on me. She brought casseroles when I was grieving. She sat beside me at church. She told everyone how proud Michael would have been of the way I carried on. If someone had asked me that morning whether I trusted Eleanor Bennett, I would have answered without hesitation. Yes, completely. Yet her name was sitting in the middle of a mystery involving my identity, my finances, and years of activity I knew nothing about. I looked back at the letter resting on my desk. The room felt strangely quiet. Even the ticking clock seemed louder than usual. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There had to be a misunderstanding hidden somewhere inside the paperwork. But deep down, a feeling I could not ignore began to grow. Someone had been using my name. Someone had been doing it for years. And for the first time, I was afraid the truth might be closer to home than I ever imagined. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling around me, the soft creaks in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind brushing against the windows. 3 years had passed since Michael died, yet some nights I still expected to hear his footsteps coming down the hall. Instead, there was only silence. The kind of silence that gives your thoughts too much room to grow. By sunrise, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a legal pad, a cup of coffee, and the tax notice spread open in front of me. I wrote Eleanor's name at the top of the page and stared at it. The letters looked harmless, ordinary, familiar. For more than 2 decades, she had been part of my life. I remembered the first Thanksgiving after Michael introduced me to his family. Eleanor had welcomed me with a warm smile and a hug that felt genuine. She had taught me her recipes. She had mailed birthday cards every year without fail. After Michael and I married, she often told people she considered me the daughter she never had. Those memories did not fit the picture forming in front of me. That was what made everything so difficult. If a stranger had appeared in those documents, I would have accepted the facts immediately. But Eleanor was woven into the fabric of my life. Doubting her felt like doubting my own memories. Still, the paperwork existed. Facts existed. And facts deserved answers. Later that morning, I began pulling out old records. I opened boxes I had not touched since Michael's death. Dust clung to my fingers as I sorted through folders labeled insurance, mortgage, retirement, and taxes. Each file carried pieces of a life Michael and I had built together. Looking through them felt like walking through old photographs. There were documents from vacations, home renovations, and investment decisions we had made over coffee at this very table. For a moment, I forgot why I was searching. Then I found a folder containing financial records from 6 years earlier. I sat down immediately. Several forms listed my information. My address, my social security number, my signature. At least it looked like my signature. I studied it carefully. Something felt wrong. The shape was similar, but the flow was stiff, almost as if someone had practiced it repeatedly before putting pen to paper. A chill ran through me. I pulled out other documents bearing my real signature and compared them side by side. The differences were subtle. Most people would never notice. But I had spent decades reviewing paperwork. Details mattered. Tiny details often revealed the biggest truths. As the afternoon sunlight crossed the living room floor, another realization surfaced. Eleanor had always insisted on helping with family paperwork after Michael passed away. She offered to organize files. She volunteered to handle forms. At the time, I had been grieving and overwhelmed. Her help felt like kindness. Now, every memory seemed different. Every gesture carried a question mark. By evening, my legal pad was covered with notes, dates, and account numbers. The list kept growing. So did my uneasiness. I still did not know exactly what had happened. I still did not know how much was involved. But one thing had become impossible to ignore. This was not a single mistake buried in government records. The pattern stretched back years. And the deeper I looked, the more it seemed someone had carefully counted on me never looking at all. The following morning, I decided I needed information that did not come from my own filing cabinets. Assumptions were dangerous. Evidence mattered. After breakfast, I called the tax office again and requested copies of every document connected to the account listed in the notice. The process took time, but by early afternoon I had enough information to start connecting pieces. Several forms had been submitted over a period of years. The dates stretched farther back than I expected. Some were filed while Michael was still alive. Others appeared after his death. What caught my attention was not only the consistency of the paperwork, but the confidence behind it. Whoever handled these records knew exactly what they were doing. The account had not been created recklessly. It had been maintained carefully. That realization unsettled me more than anything else. Mistakes happen. Long-term patterns require intention. I sat at my desk with a yellow legal pad and began writing down every date. One by one, I compared them with events I remembered. A filing from 6 years ago coincided with a family vacation. Another appeared shortly after Michael underwent a medical procedure that left both of us distracted for weeks. Another surfaced during the months after his funeral when I struggled to manage paperwork while grieving. The timing felt too convenient, almost as if someone had chosen moments when my attention was elsewhere. As the list grew, another thought entered my mind. I needed an outside perspective. There was one person I trusted completely, Rachel Morgan. We had known each other for nearly 15 years. She specialized in real estate and estate matters, but more importantly, she possessed a sharp eye for details most people overlooked. I called her that evening. She listened without interrupting. When I finished explaining everything, the silence on the line lasted several seconds. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, but serious. She told me not to confront anyone. Not yet. She told me to gather every record I could find and bring copies to her office. Most importantly, she told me something I had been reluctant to admit. If documents existed, then someone had likely benefited from them. That simple observation changed the way I viewed the situation. Until then, I had focused on the paperwork itself. Rachel shifted my attention toward motive. Who gained something from these transactions? Who had access? Who had opportunity? That night, I opened another storage box in the hall closet. Inside were old correspondence files Michael had maintained for years. Most contained routine records, utility bills, insurance notices, retirement statements. Then I found an envelope with Eleanor's handwriting on the front. It was addressed to Michael. The date caught my attention immediately. It matched one of the periods connected to the suspicious filings. My pulse quickened. I carefully removed the contents. The letter itself seemed ordinary. Family updates, community events, casual conversation. Yet attached to the back was a photocopy of a financial form. Eleanor had circled several sections in blue ink. Beside one section, she had written a short note for Michael. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. I stared at the page for a long time. The form referenced information remarkably similar to the records I had been investigating. It was not proof of wrongdoing. Not yet, but it established something important. Eleanor was familiar with these types of documents years before I ever knew they existed. I placed the papers back into the envelope and leaned back in my chair. Outside, darkness settled across the neighborhood. Inside, the pieces of the puzzle were beginning to move into place. For the first time since opening that letter, I stopped wondering whether there was a problem. The question now was how far it went. 2 days later, I sat across from Rachel in her office. The walls were lined with shelves filled with legal books, framed certificates, and neatly organized files. Normally, the room felt reassuring. That morning, it felt like a place where uncomfortable truths waited patiently to be discovered. Rachel reviewed every document I had brought. She moved carefully, page by page, making notes without saying much. The silence stretched long enough to make me nervous. Finally, she placed several forms side by side and pointed to the signatures. At first glance, they appeared identical. But once she highlighted specific details, the differences became obvious. Certain letters were formed differently. Some strokes were hesitant where mine were fluid. Others looked as though someone had copied the appearance of my signature without understanding the rhythm behind it. Rachel explained that people often focus on what a signature looks like. Experts focus on how it is created. I listened quietly as she continued comparing dates and records. Then she found something that immediately caught her attention. Several transactions connected to the account occurred on days when I had been traveling with Michael. One happened during a week we spent visiting friends in Colorado. Another occurred while we were attending a family wedding in Ohio. According to the records, documents had been signed in person hundreds of miles away from where I actually was. Rachel leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. The evidence was no longer pointing toward a misunderstanding. It was pointing toward deliberate activity. On the drive home, I found myself replaying old memories. Small moments that once seemed insignificant suddenly returned with startling clarity. I remembered Eleanor asking detailed questions about financial matters during family dinners. I remembered her volunteering to help organize paperwork after Michael's health began declining. I remembered how frequently she offered to drop documents at offices on our behalf when life became busy. At the time, I appreciated her involvement. She always appeared helpful, dependable, caring. Looking back, I realized something unsettling. Eleanor often seemed to know more about our finances than most relatives ever would. That evening, I opened another box from the storage room. Near the bottom sat a binder I had not touched in years. Inside were records from Michael's investment accounts. Most pages contained exactly what I expected. Then I noticed several missing sections. Empty spaces appeared where supporting documents should have been. The binder showed signs that pages had been removed carefully rather than lost accidentally. I searched every shelf in the house. Eventually, I found some of the missing records tucked inside a completely different folder. The placement made no sense. Whoever moved them had not wanted them to be found easily. As I reviewed those papers, a familiar name appeared again. Eleanor Bennett. Not on every page. Not prominently. Just enough to leave a trail. A witness signature here. A secondary contact there. Administrative references scattered across years of records. Individually, none of them proved anything. Together, they formed a pattern that was becoming impossible to ignore. I sat alone in the living room long after sunset, surrounded by stacks of paper. The television remained off. The house was silent except for the ticking clock above the fireplace. For the first time, I stopped asking whether Eleanor was connected to the mystery. The documents had already answered that question. What I still did not understand was why, and somehow, I had the feeling the answer would be far more painful than the paperwork itself. Over the next week, I stopped looking at Eleanor as my mother-in-law and started looking at her as a subject of investigation. It was not a role I enjoyed. In fact, every discovery made me feel worse. Part of me wanted the evidence to disappear. Part of me wanted a simple explanation that would allow everything to return to normal. But the deeper I searched, the harder that became. Rachel and I continued reviewing records. She focused on legal documents while I concentrated on financial history. Together, we began building a timeline. What surprised me most was how carefully everything had been hidden. There were no dramatic transactions, no sudden withdrawals large enough to attract attention. Instead, there were small amounts scattered across years. A few $1,000s here, another amount there. Each individual transaction seemed ordinary. Combined, they represented a substantial sum. More importantly, they revealed a consistent pattern. Someone had been counting on patience and secrecy. One afternoon, Rachel called and asked me to come to her office immediately. Her tone was calm, but I could tell she had found something important. When I arrived, several documents were spread across her conference table. She pointed to a series of authorization forms connected to the same account. At first glance, they appeared routine. Then she showed me the dates. Every form had been submitted shortly before major family events. Holidays, weddings, anniversaries, periods when attention was naturally focused elsewhere. I stared at the timeline and felt a knot form in my stomach. The pattern was impossible to dismiss. Someone had chosen moments when questions were least likely to be asked. Driving home, I found myself thinking about Eleanor's public image. In our town, people admired her. She volunteered at church. She organized charity drives. She never missed community events. Whenever someone needed help, Eleanor somehow appeared with a smile and a solution. For years, I had admired that about her. So had everyone else. The realization that troubled me was not simply that she might have done something wrong. It was that the person everyone trusted most was the last person anyone would suspect. That evening, I attended a church fundraiser I had promised to support months earlier. Eleanor was there, greeting guests near the entrance. As always, people gravitated toward her. She laughed easily, remembered names, asked thoughtful questions. Watching her interact with everyone felt strangely surreal. I stood across the room and observed quietly. Nothing about her behavior seemed unusual. Nothing hinted at the growing stack of documents sitting in Rachel's office. For a brief moment, I wondered whether I was losing perspective. Then I remembered the signatures, the accounts, the dates. Facts remained facts, regardless of appearances. Before leaving, Eleanor approached me with a warm smile and asked how I had been doing. I answered politely. She told me she worried that I spent too much time alone. She suggested we have lunch together soon. Her concerns sounded genuine. That was the hardest part. If she was involved, she had maintained the illusion flawlessly for years. Later that night, I reviewed my notes once more. Near the bottom of one page, I noticed a reference number tied to an older transaction. It had seemed insignificant before. Now it caught my attention. The number connected multiple records that should not have been connected at all. I called Rachel immediately. After a brief pause, she told me the same thing I had begun to suspect. We were getting closer to the center of the story. And somewhere behind all the paperwork, a single missing piece was waiting to explain everything. The next morning, Rachel called before I had even finished my coffee. I could hear excitement in her voice, the kind that only appeared when a difficult puzzle finally revealed a critical piece. She asked me to come to her office as soon as possible. When I arrived, she handed me a copy of a document that had been retrieved through a formal records request. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Another authorization form. Another page filled with legal language and signatures. Then Rachel pointed to a section near the bottom. A notary seal, a date, and a witness name. My eyes moved slowly across the page until they landed on the signature. The witness listed on the document had passed away nearly 4 years before the form was supposedly signed. I looked up at Rachel, certain I had misunderstood. She shook her head. She had already verified the information. The dates did not match. The witness could not have been present, which meant the document itself could not be authentic. For several moments, neither of us spoke. This was the first piece of evidence that directly challenged the validity of the paperwork. Until now, we had been building a pattern. Now we had something concrete, something measurable, something impossible to explain away as a clerical error. Rachel continued digging through the records and uncovered another unusual detail. The notary commission number printed on the form belonged to an individual who had retired years before the document was filed. Again, the timeline made no sense. One discrepancy might be accidental. 2 discrepancies pointed towards something far more serious. I drove home with copies of the records beside me on the passenger seat. The autumn air felt colder than usual. Every traffic light seemed to last longer. My thoughts kept returning to Eleanor. I remembered family gatherings where she proudly spoke about honesty and responsibility. I remembered hearing neighbors praise her integrity. Those memories no longer felt comforting. They felt confusing. By late afternoon, I spread every major document across my dining room table. Pages covered nearly the entire surface. I arranged them chronologically and stepped back. For the first time, the full timeline became visible. The activity began quietly. Then it expanded. Small actions led to larger ones. Additional forms appeared. More authorizations followed. The pattern resembled someone testing boundaries, discovering they would not be challenged, and gradually becoming more confident. As I studied the sequence, one particular document caught my attention. I had overlooked it several times because it seemed insignificant. Yet unlike the others, it contained a reference to a storage file maintained by a financial institution. Rachel had mentioned that supporting records sometimes remained archived even when account activity appeared routine. Acting on instinct, I called the institution and requested information about the reference file. The representative informed me that obtaining access would require additional paperwork, but the file did exist. That single confirmation sent a wave of anticipation through me. If archived records were still available, they might contain details no one expected to survive. Details that could explain how everything had been arranged. That evening, I sat alone by the living room window watching darkness settle across the neighborhood. For weeks, I had been following clues without knowing where they would lead. Now, for the first time, I sensed we were approaching something significant. The missing piece Rachel and I had been searching for was no longer theoretical. It was sitting somewhere inside an archive file waiting to be opened. And deep down, I knew that whatever was hidden there had the power to change everything. 3 days later, the archive file arrived. Rachel called me the moment it was available, and within an hour I was sitting across from her once again. A thick folder rested on the conference table between us. Neither of us spoke as she opened it. Months earlier, I would have viewed the stack of papers as boring administrative records. Now it felt like opening a door that had remained locked for years. Rachel carefully reviewed the contents while I watched. Account correspondence, authorization requests, internal notes, verification forms, page after page of information that had never appeared in the records I kept at home. Then she stopped turning pages. Her expression changed immediately. She slid a document toward me. It was an authorization request connected to the account we had been tracing. Attached to it was a photocopy of identification used during the verification process. My name appeared on the document. The address matched my home. But the supporting information contained details that should never have been accepted without direct confirmation from me. Rachel pointed to several sections highlighted in yellow. The institution had recorded repeated communications with a representative acting on my behalf. According to the notes, that representative possessed personal information detailed enough to answer security questions and complete verification procedures. The file did not explicitly identify wrongdoing, but it confirmed something important. Access had not occurred accidentally. It had been maintained through deliberate and ongoing contact. As we continued reviewing the records, another document emerged. This one was different. It contained a written request submitted years earlier seeking expanded authority related to the account. The signature was supposedly mine. Even before Rachel spoke, I knew something was wrong. The signature carried the same unnatural stiffness we had noticed before. More importantly, the date immediately caught my attention. On that day, I had been in Colorado with Michael visiting close friends. I still had photographs from the trip. I still had hotel records. I could prove exactly where I was. Rachel leaned back in her chair and slowly closed the folder. The room felt unusually quiet. We had finally reached the point where assumptions were no longer necessary. The timeline, the signatures, the impossible witness records, and now the archive file all pointed in the same direction. What remained unclear was how much Eleanor had gained and whether anyone else knew what had happened. Driving home, I found myself thinking less about money and more about trust. The financial loss mattered, of course, but trust was harder to measure. For years, I had welcomed Eleanor into my home. I had shared holidays with her. I had accepted her support after Michael passed away. Every memory now seemed to carry a second version hidden beneath the first. That evening, Rachel called again. She had continued reviewing several pages after I left. Near the back of the archive, she discovered a reference to another supporting file that had not been included in the original request. It contained correspondence connected to account maintenance and authorization changes. Obtaining it would take additional time, but Rachel sounded more confident than ever. Before ending the call, she said something I could not stop thinking about. She believed we were only one document away from understanding the entire story. I looked at the growing stack of records on my dining room table and felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. The truth was getting closer, and for the first time, I was not sure which would be more difficult to face, discovering what Eleanor had done or discovering exactly how long she believed she would never be caught. The final supporting file arrived the following week. By then, I had reached a strange emotional state. The fear that once accompanied every discovery had faded. In its place was a quiet determination to see the truth all the way through. Rachel called me shortly after lunch and asked me to meet her at the office. The moment I walked into the conference room, I knew something had changed. A single document sat on the table, separated from the rest of the records. Rachel did not speak immediately. Instead, she handed me the file and allowed me to read it myself. The document was a request for expanded authority connected to the account we had been investigating. Unlike the previous records, this one included correspondence between the institution and the person managing the account. Several pages contained detailed notes regarding account changes, verification procedures, and ongoing communication. Then I reached a page that made my breath catch. Attached to the request was a handwritten instruction directing future correspondence to be sent through an alternate contact. The handwriting was unmistakable. I had seen it on birthday cards, holiday invitations, and countless family notes over the years. It belonged to Eleanor. For a long moment, I simply stared at the page. Every remaining doubt disappeared. This was not a coincidence. It was not confusion. It was not a clerical error buried inside an old system. Eleanor had been actively involved. Rachel pointed out additional details. The correspondence established a direct connection between Eleanor and the account administration process. It also showed that the arrangement continued for years without interruption. More importantly, the document explained why the activity remained hidden. Communications were redirected. Notifications were managed. Questions that should have reached me never arrived. Someone had built a system designed to avoid attention. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Oddly, I did not feel anger. I felt disappointment. Deep, overwhelming disappointment. The person I had trusted for decades had spent years maintaining a secret while standing beside me at family dinners, church events, and holiday gatherings. The money mattered, but it was no longer the center of the story. Trust had become the real loss. Rachel then showed me something else. Using the timeline we had assembled, she created a complete summary of events. Dates, documents, transactions, correspondence, signatures, verification records. Every piece fit together with remarkable consistency. Looking at the completed timeline felt like watching a photograph come into focus. Questions that had haunted me for weeks finally had answers. Before leaving, I asked Rachel what she believed the strongest piece of evidence was. She tapped the handwritten instruction, not because it contained the largest transaction, not because it carried the greatest financial significance, but because it established direct involvement in a way that could not easily be explained away. The drive home felt different from every drive before it. For months, I had been searching for answers. Now I had them. That evening, I sat at my dining room table and reviewed the complete file one last time. The stack of papers represented years of hidden actions, careful planning, and misplaced trust. Yet among hundreds of pages, one document stood above all the others. One document connected everything. One document transformed suspicion into certainty. As I placed it back into the folder, I realized the investigation was over. The evidence was complete. The only thing left was deciding how the truth would finally be revealed. The following Sunday, I invited several family members to dinner. Nothing about the invitation seemed unusual. We had gathered countless times over the years for birthdays, holidays, and simple Sunday meals. Eleanor accepted immediately. Her message was warm and cheerful, just as it had always been. By the time everyone arrived that evening, the house was filled with familiar voices. The dining room table looked exactly as it had during so many family gatherings before. Yet beneath the surface, everything had changed. I spent the first hour talking about ordinary things. Work, travel, community events. No one sensed what was coming. Eleanor seemed completely comfortable. She laughed at stories, complimented the meal, and spoke with the same confidence that had earned her admiration for years. Looking at her, It would have been impossible for a stranger to imagine what I had spent months uncovering. After dessert, I stood and carried a folder from my office to the dining room table. The room gradually became quiet. Several relatives exchanged curious glances. Eleanor looked mildly puzzled but remained relaxed. I placed the folder in front of me and took a slow breath. My hands were steady. For weeks, I had imagined this moment. Surprisingly, I felt calm. I explained that I had received a notice several months earlier regarding financial records connected to my name. I described the investigation that followed. I described the documents, the timelines, the signatures, and the archived files. No accusations, no raised voice, just facts. As I spoke, the room grew silent. Some family members looked confused. Others appeared concerned. Eleanor's expression changed very little at first. Then I placed the final document on the table, the handwritten instruction, the piece of evidence that connected everything together. I watched as relatives examined the pages one by one. Questions began quietly. Then more questions followed. Dates were compared. Signatures were discussed. Timelines were reviewed. Nobody needed dramatic explanations. The documents spoke clearly enough on their own. Eleanor attempted to offer explanations for several details, but each answer created new inconsistencies. The more the records were reviewed, the more difficult it became to dismiss the evidence. What struck me most was not anyone's reaction. It was the absence of denial from the documents themselves. Facts remained exactly where they had always been, waiting to be seen. By the end of the evening, the atmosphere had completely changed. The image people held of Eleanor had been built over decades, but trust depends on credibility. Once credibility begins to crack, rebuilding it becomes difficult. Several relatives expressed disappointment. Others remained quiet, struggling to process what they had learned. No arguments erupted. No dramatic confrontation occurred. The truth simply settled over the room. When the gathering ended, people left slowly and thoughtfully. After the last car disappeared down the street, I returned to the dining room alone. The folder still rested on the table. Months earlier, I believed the story was about missing money. I understood now that it had never been about money alone. It was about trust, honesty, and the consequences of believing that secrets can remain hidden forever. I carried the folder back to my office and placed it inside a cabinet. For the first time since receiving that unexpected letter, I felt a sense of peace. The investigation was over. The uncertainty was gone. The truth no longer belonged to me alone. And as I turned off the light and walked toward the hallway, I realized something important. The document that changed everything did not destroy a reputation by itself. It simply revealed the difference between the person people believed they knew and the person who had been there all along.